Hi, this is Misha, and this is episode 3 of Storytime, where I just talk about my guns, how I got them, my connection to them, and so on and so forth. And I thought this episode would be really good to kind of share my more or less love affair with firearms from Karl Walther out of Germany. I'm not a big collector of Nazi stuff. I find Imperial German stuff from World War I more interesting, but Walthers have always held a special place, and I have several. We have quite a few older videos, and we revisit them from time to time. I just brought out 7 of the guns that I would share little stories about. I have others, of course. I'm going to start with this gun here. This is, of course, your standard PPK. This is a post-war make out of West Germany. And this isn't my original PPK, but this one I pulled out today to talk about. When I was getting into guns, one of the first guns I purchased was a World War II, or maybe pre-World War II PPK. Back then you could still pick them up for not a whole lot. I mean, they were a lot more expensive than the post-war ones, but I did. And then a short time later, I found a post-war Herein PP at a local shop for a good price, and I picked it up too. These are 2 of my earliest guns. I no longer have either of those, but I did pick this one up a few years after that, and I really like it. It's a good shooter PPK. It's one of the Herein Walther contract guns, which really all the post-war guns were to some extent, at least up until the US made ones and so on and so forth. The history is for another video, guys. Essentially, I found this when pawn shopping one Friday with my father years ago, where we just kind of went around to various pawn shops, saw what they had, and there was a gun show the next day. Went into one of the pawn shops that my father was acquainted with the owner. I wouldn't say friends, but knew him. And this is one of the guns he had. And he was about ready to pack it up to take to the gun show. And I liked it, as is what it is. And essentially he made a really good deal on it, with 2 mags and a holster for $300, if I would save him the trouble of having to haul it over to the gun show and risk maybe it getting stolen or scratched up or whatever. Little guns, gun shows, bad things. So I picked it up, and obviously still have it today, and it's a really neat, honest PPK. I do still have a wartime PPK, but it's one with a Dural frame. This one has the steel frame, so this one I can shoot. The Dural I really don't. I also have a PPK S, which is a police trade-in gun, which is really the one I shoot most of them all, because it's frankly just the most comfortable. But yeah, some of my earliest handguns were Walthers. I always enjoyed them. Of course, there's always the James Bond connection. I mean, I grew up at the time I grew up in. That's no secret there. But also, they were very small, very well-made guns for the time they were available. And they have a lot of historical significance and service, so all around, they interested me when I got into guns, and they still do today. Another one here is my first Walther Model 4. This is a relatively early production version and made in World War I, 1915, give or take. I have a later example made after the war too. These are neat little service guns. People don't realize how many of the little Walther 7.65 Browning 32s that Germany used in World War I, but it was a substitute standard. This gun in particular has some personal affinity. Without getting too much into detail, let's just say I picked it up the day after a major life event, a good major life event, so it has, good fond memories associated with it. And it's a neat gun to boot. I got this in 2009. So yeah, it brings back a lot of good memories, and it was the first Model 4 I picked up. This was really the first gun that was big time success for Walther too. Moving on. We have this gun here. This is probably the prize in my Walther collection. It's been in a few videos. This is my HP. This is not a P88. This is one of the Swedish contract guns, made in 1939 for Sweden. And I received this through a friend. He had a business acquaintance, I would say, not a friend, who had this, and that acquaintance was known for pricing guns extremely high, but for whatever reason he wasn't really aware of the value or whatever of these non-P38 P38s, the HPs. So I ended up getting it for what I considered at the time a very good price, thanks to the help of a friend, and I definitely still consider it a very good deal. This one is interesting because it has a lot of the early features that they would soon go away from. It's quite a bit like a Zero Series Trials gun. We have the early style firing pin, we have the early style safety decocker, we have the checkered takedown, we have the early style checkered grips, which look very much like P1 grips, which they would use after the war, except we have a round lanyard hole with a round lanyard in it, so that's a little different. The front sight's also shaped a bit differently. Just little things like that that set these apart from later production guns. And I like that it has a connection to Sweden instead of the Nazis. I just think that the Swedish connection is very interesting because they were going to adopt these before other things got in the way, and that's ultimately what led to the Swedish M40 Lottie. So again, a lot of history here, nice memories of a friend doing a favor, and just a good deal. All around, just one of those guns that makes me very happy to have it. Moving on, we have another gun in that same line. This probably looks like a P38 or a P1. It sort of is. This is a P4. This is ex-German police. You can see the machined out spot where the police markings were taken off. This is pretty much the same gun as a P1, except we have a shorter 4-inch barrel, and we have a decocker only instead of a safety decocker. It's spring loaded, so once you decock, it springs back up. These were made in the 70s for police use. They were kind of an interim stopgap between the P1 and the later P5, when German police decided they needed to get away from 32 caliber 7.65 Browning and go to something more powerful like 9x19 Parabellum. I found this while my wife and I were on kind of a half business trip, half vacation down in Houston at a large gun shop down there, and it has an interesting memory. My wife had to do some business, government business, and it was going to take a couple hours, so we were taking a cab. I had them drop me off at this gun shop. Now, believe it or not, guys, when you go into gun shops and you're blind, people don't really take you all that seriously. And I was asking some questions about some guns they had, and the guy behind the counter said, "I don't have time to sit here and pull out every gun and deal with you all day," and pretty much left. Thankfully, the gunsmith who was on staff at the time maybe had an inkling of what was about to happen and going on, and came up and personally walked me around the store, showed me any guns that I wanted, spent the afternoon with me, and even I said, you know, after 30 minutes, I said, if you need to do something else, just leave me here, I can entertain myself, and he was really gracious and took time, and I ended up buying, I think, 4 or 5 guns off of him, and even bought a $4,000 Johnson 1941 for my father, which had always been wanting. So, you know, it was a big sale for them. I mean, I know it's a large store, and they probably have machine gun sales, but, you know, still yet. And I would even buy from that gunsmith that was on staff there for a couple of years afterwards. So, kind of one of those in-your-face things to that first rude sales guy, and was very grateful to the second guy who gave kind of the benefit of the doubt, and it was really a nice thing. And I'd kind of always wanted a P4. These are not terribly common. They didn't make a bunch of them. There were these police trade-ins. There's also a civilian version called a P38 Roman numeral 4 that was imported back in the 80s somewhat, but they're just as rare and hard to find. So it just went well. This wasn't a lot of money. This was $400 at the time, which wasn't that many years ago, about 5-6 years ago. And I thought $400 for kind of an interesting take on a P1, because at the time P1s were $350 anyway, so a little extra for a little bit of rarity. And it's in good shape. It's a good shooter. I just kind of added to my Walther collection. Moving on, we have my P88. And as you can tell, this is not a safe, clean gun or a mint gun. In fact, it's an ex-service gun. I obtained this back in 2009, I believe it was, through a friend who worked at Century Firearms through one of their odd lot lists. He knew my thing for Walthers, and they had 5 of these show up on an odd lot list. I believe they came out of Israel. In fact, the tag that it came with had Hebrew on it, so it seems to have been an ex-Israeli police gun. And these are priced very fair. They were under $500, but the problem is they did not come with magazines. But still, $500, $450 I think it was, for a P88 in good working order was a good price then. It still is today. And my friend over there, the sales guy, even helped me find magazines. As it turns out, Numeric had brand new mags, even the high capacity 15 shot, with the only catch, they were marked 9x21, which is a European cartridge, so they weren't priced as high as regular, especially high capacity P88 mags in the US. But 9x21 and 9x19 are the same dimensions practically, and use the same OEM mags. They're just marked differently, so it was good fortune there. I picked up a couple of mags for it, and I have shot it. It's a really fun gun to shoot. I think they have interesting features. So it's another gun I picked up through the help of a friend that I thought was a really good price. And up until this gun, I'd always wanted a P88, but just never could afford one. I mean, the original ones that were brought over commercially were priced out of sight then, or even higher now, and you just didn't see many police trade-in. So even though this one's not in mint condition, I think that it has some service history behind it. It's pretty neat. So it's probably one I'll never get rid of. And I brought my P88 Compact out too, because it also has a story. This also came from Century Arms. It was on an odd lot. It was marked as P88C, P88 Compact. It was at the end of that same year, because I remember I picked it up New Year's Eve, so it would be New Year's Eve of 2009, and it was on their odd lot list for $299.87 with free shipping. And I expected it to be a surplus gun in good condition, because it was just marked as good, very good. Well, when it came in, it was not only in excellent condition, it was in the original European-style cardboard box with the polymer cleaning rod, manual, and 2 14-round Walther mags. Now, most all of the P88 Compacts in the USA came with 10-round mags because they were imported during the federal assault weapons ban. So it was really neat to find a gun with the full-sized magazine, and it came in the European cardboard box, which tells me it came out of there somewhere. The box itself was in great shape. It had a little bit of fading on it from maybe being in a window or something, but the gun looked to be next to unfired. So it was just a great find, I thought, for $300. And there are things I actually like about the compact more than the full size. The full size has a lot more interesting features, but the compact, a little smaller, a little lighter, and it feels a little sturdier, a little better built somehow. Less fancy decocker and all that, more conventional, but also I would honestly trust it for heavy use a little more. It's sized about like the SIG P228. It's a neat little gun. So just another neat little story from the Century Arms odd lot list. And these are just reasons why Walthers are special to me and all that. And finally here we have my P99. This is the military version, obviously, with the green frame. It has the single double action trigger, so it's the original P99. Now this is not my original gun. I first picked one of these up in 2000. It was in .40 caliber. It was marked as used, unfired at a local shop. And I was really just getting into handguns at the time. I'd had the PPK and the PP for a little bit, as well as a Makarov and some other handguns, but I only had a few handguns, and I wanted a modern gun. Well, I had shot a Glock since the late 80s when a family member was issued one for work, and I shot it. And I was kind of on Glocks. Remember back in the late 90s, it was mostly Gen 1s and Gen 2s. The Gen 3s were just starting to kind of become prevalent. So I thought I would try a Walther polymer frame gun. Plus, hey, these were just starting to show up in James Bond movies too. The first time at the store someone set one of these in my hand, I knew I was going to go home with it because it just fit right. The ergonomics today on a P99 are good, but for the late 90s, early 2000s, they were superb. Plus, you get a decocker, which was really interesting for a polymer gun then, and Walther was the first to introduce these interchangeable back straps. Not only are these interchangeable, they're actually made out of a semi-hard rubber, so they even kind of act as a cushion in your hand. It's just a great gun all around. Now, as I said, my first one was in .40, and it was during the assault weapons ban, so I had a 10-round mag. After the ban was lifted in September of 2004, a year or two later, I kind of got out of .40 cal. So I sold that one off. I also had a compact in .40 and replaced them with 9mm. Now I have a Gen 2, as it's called, P99 Compact, but for my full size I wanted an original so-called Gen 1. So I found this one very lightly used on Gunbroker with the case. Now originally it came with the 10-round limited mags, but it just so happens that Century Arms had a bunch of surplus in excellent, even unissued condition 16-shot Gen 1 mags, not even the Gen 2. There's a small difference. So I ended up with a big box of P99 mags, which I kept a few of for myself, and then I shared the other ones with friends that I also knew had P99s. So that was just a stroke of good luck. And it's one I'm really, for a polymer gun, even though it's kind of it's 20 years old now, still one of my favorites. Still very happy with it. It's just a nice gun. Good trigger for what it is too. And this is really the forerunner, the father of today's PPQ. Mechanically and even kind of ergonomically, the PPQ is very much descended from this gun right here. So, from the original M4 up Model 4 up to the P99 and into the PPQs, Walthers have always just been kind of special to me. And I have other Walthers and stories that go along with them, but I don't know, these seem like the ones I felt like sharing today in story time. If you also like Walthers, I'd love to hear from fellow fans. You know, we often get kind of drowned out by the Glock guys, and there's nothing wrong with Glocks. I have a couple too, but it's always nice to meet Walther fans. It just seems like we're kind of a quieter breed. We're not as out there as HK or even SIG, but we tend to be pretty hard fans, and they've always made good guns. Really, up until recently, it was a family-owned company up until the 90s, so that was kind of nice. They've eventually changed hands like everything has. But they still have really put a lot into ergonomics and also cost. I mean, Walthers aren't cheap, but compared to other German guns, such as Sig Sauer and HK, they are less expensive, which is nice, and you still get very nice quality. And of course, these days, Walthers are imported at Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is just down the road from us here. So that's kind of even a more confirmation of my whole Walther thing. Well, we'd love to hear your stories below. If you have any questions or comments, please post them. If you're interested more in the history, we have videos on that. Check those out, please. If you like the video, please click. If you haven't already subscribed, we'd welcome if you do that too. And check in again next time for new episodes of Storytime and just new reviews and other things relating to firearms. This is Misha, and we'll catch you next time.